Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cinemaniacs, the podcast that gives you thoughtful takes on the films that you love and hate. We're your hosts, I'm Keanu.
And I'm Alex, and in this episode, we are going to take you through the filmography of one of the most revered and admired filmmakers of the 20th century.
A master of the form in all its parts, ladies and gentlemen, that is the great Stanley Kubrick. Before we get into all things Kubrick, we got some upcoming releases in Australia to announce.
To start, we've got the musical thriller that has been memed to oblivion, Emilia Perez. We've got the romantic comedy starring Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh, We Live in Time. I know I'm looking forward to that one. We've got a horror fantasy from Blumhouse by the name of Wolfman. And then we've got three that I'm not so familiar with. They are the prison drama Sing Sing, the action thriller, which is in Cantonese, called The Prosecutor, and the family comedy called And the Breadwinner Is. So, how have you done this week? Keanu, you watching any new films?
Any new films from me? To kick off this week, I haven't seen much. Oh, no, wait, what am I talking about? I watched the first two Pirates of the Caribbeans yesterday. Just out of
Very nice.
random...
They're some of my favorites. What did you think?
It's been a while since I've seen them. I don't remember a drop of them from when I last saw them, but definitely enjoyable. Of course, Johnny Depp, being the eccentric Captain Jack Sparrow, is brilliant. And just the production design, but budget through the roof, and of course, definitely pays off with just this super immersive, super exciting world of pirates.
Absolutely. This week I watched three new films. I watched The Menu, which had been a long-time recommendation from one of my friends at uni. It's not the masterpiece he sold it to me as, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. We both watched Conclave at the cinemas, which I really enjoyed.
That we did.
Who's the main actor again? The guy that plays Voldemort? I forget his name.
Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing his name, but I've always pronounced it as Ralph Fiennes.
Yeah, that guy. He was really good, I thought.
Yeah, he's good.
And then also, I watched Full Metal Jacket in preparation for this recording, Keanu.
Very good.
Really, really enjoyed it. Now feels like a good time to fill you guys in on what we're going to do today. We're doing something a bit different. We're going to try see how this works, and maybe we'll do it again in the future. We're going to go through the filmography of a director that, in this case, Keanu thinks is significant, and I happen to agree. So we're basically going to go through his entire, filmography, find out what we know about the man, and see how we go. And I think we're going to get into that after the break.
And we are back. Introducing, of course, Stanley Kubrick, the man himself. Looking at what made him so great. So to me, and what a lot of people have declared him as, is a director of extremes, and probably as confined and as accurate as you can probably sum him up in that little shorter title. So definitely a director of extremes in many ways. His content he explored, the way he executed his films, and in more ways than one, his style, of course, just everything is just through the roof extreme. He is definitely known to be a perfectionist, as some of you might know. Very famously, would get up towards 30-40 takes for scenes, no matter how big or small, and definitely had the authority to do that, being the producer for his later films. Definitely had that creative control, and that does show later in his filmography a very drastic change in his last few films in technique and in theme and in volume.
For sure. Do you know anything about the life story of Kubrick that you'd like to tell us about, or?
Not much. He was born July 26th, I think.
He knows his birthday, but he doesn't know much. All
right. In New York, I'm not sure what his mother did, but his father was a doctor, and he was definitely a recluse all his life, and definitely a very introverted kid. He said in an interview that he had very few interests as a kid, and one of the things that sort of made into his own was this thing of photography, one of the first things he became interested in. So before his film career, he was indeed a photographer, and he did become pretty successful with it. I think he was hired at 17 to photograph for Time Out. I think it was Time Out
magazine. Wow, that's interesting.
And there's a great picture of Franklin D. Roosevelt that he took. Oh, not Franklin D. Roosevelt, but a newspaper booth man who's looking at the bulletin on the wall about President Roosevelt had died. It was definitely a very
Oh, and he took that photo. I
a
had seen
very
that photo.
a very famous photo. Yeah, it's a very evocative,
That's so interesting. I had
very
no idea.
emotionally rich photograph indeed.
Mm-hmm. Well,
So yeah, definitely kicked off his career in that way, and that does show in even his very early films that he had a very gifted eye for the image from his experience as a photographer. Definitely a lot of thoughtful, very meticulous compositions in all his work.
and I think one of the things that I found interesting, you'd probably be able to shed some more light on this, is that I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't Kubrick leave the United States fairly early on in his career?
I think it was after.
I think it was sometime in the 60s, but I don't know.
Yeah.
But like either way, like what I've read at least is that he kind of grew sick of the culture of Hollywood and how things were done, and then he settled in the UK. And then I think that as we look at some of the films later in his career, like Doctor Strangelove, Full Metal Jacket, like a big part of those films is criticizing like the culture and zeitgeist of America. And I wonder if now, from his adopted home in the UK, he felt more confident going after the the most powerful country on earth.
I think he definitely did, and I think he did earn his reputation before he even went over there. Definitely with Warner Brothers, he established probably one of the greatest relationships we've seen between um, a production company and a director, where they just gave him complete trust and control in his later projects. I think it was, I'm not sure which one was first, but definitely in his later work, you do see that immense control over production and over all the stages, really, as they took so damn long. They definitely shot production stages went over a year, commonly went over almost a year, when other films are only spend maybe a few months or maybe half a year, at most a year in production. But he
really was a perfectionist. Like
definitely took his time.
Absolutely. You mentioned before we started recording something about the Steven Spielberg analogy.
Oh yes, there's a great video I saw, an interview. I think it's in the documentary Stanley Kubrick: A Life in Pictures. Do go watch that. Definitely a lot of things to discover in that. Very, very interesting. But in one interview with not Stanley Kubrick, Steven Spielberg, he has this great analogy about filmmakers and painting and an artist's approach to drawing or sketching out a concept on a blank canvas. And he said that many artists start their paintings with very detailed pencil strokes, and Stanley, on the other hand, started conceptually with these huge primary color brush strokes. And I feel like that's a interesting and very spot on analogy, really, because you do look at his films and there's just something very, again, extreme about them. Just so brash in color and in movement and in material and content. Just everything is just ramped up proper. He doesn't really deal with intimate dramas. He looks at the more
big
grand things about life and past, present, emerging future.
I see.
So yeah, definitely.
So is there anything else you want to talk about Kubrick, or should we start to move on to his films?
I think what also made him great was his constant desire to change his material. He didn't really, although he does have some filmmaking techniques that sort of translate through, he definitely elevated or changed them throughout his career. Definitely had a more experimental approach to filmmaking. And I think what made him great in that sense was that he was just after creating something that was entirely emotional, an entirely emotional experience that relied on emotion and experience rather than intellectual story. It wasn't so much important to understand what was happening in his films. It was more important to receive a great feeling or even a thrill of discovering what his message was, which was completely different to what anybody had done, I believe. And he was a chameleon as well, as Steven Spielberg again put it. He never made the same picture twice. Although his probably his most interesting area of interest, his area of interest was probably war.
I was going to say, because Doctor Strangelove and Full Metal Jacket, while they're like two very different films, they share like some similarities thematically, I think.
Yeah, and there's also Paths of Glory, which is also a war film, but nevertheless, his technique and what he's really exploring does change dramatically, and he definitely stretched his skill over many different genres. He has a period drama, a horror film, a romance, a psychological drama, psychological horror. Just really doesn't settle for one area of expertise, and really just tries to look at things from a more grand, more broad standpoint.
To make his mark in every genre, I think.
Yeah, I think yeah.
Yeah, I think with that, we're gonna move on to our next segment. We'll still call it Film Spotlight, but this time we've got a lot more films to talk about. We'll see you after the break. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Cinemaniacs for Film Spotlight. Today, we're looking at, I think, 13 of Kubrick's greatest films, all of which were hits in their respective genres. So we've got a lot to talk about, so Keanu, I'm not going to waste any more time, and we're going to start off with Fear and Desire, 1953. Do you want to tell us about it?
Here we go. So, it was his first go at narrative filmmaking. Definitely not a standout. In fact, probably his least impressive, his least memorable film of all. In fact, he completely discredited it. He completely distanced himself from it. He doesn't want anything to do with it. I think a quote that I saw of him, it was the only area of pride that I could draw from this film was the fact that it was finished. That's what that is somewhat in his words. So definitely not a director not very fond of his own work, especially starting out.
Do you know what that reminds me of? I'm just going to paraphrase a quote. It's like, films are like pancakes. The first one's always a throwaway.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
In this case, definitely was a throwaway. But that's not to say that very early Kubrick was hinting to people that he was very skilled in capturing an image. It's a very short film. I think it's only a little over an hour.
Oh wow,
an hour long. It's classified as a short feature film, and definitely showed his skill in capturing appealing compositions. And that sort of was the only strong point of the film. Really, the characters weren't so interesting, and that's probably because there wasn't enough time to really expand upon those characters, and the structure as well was kind of all over the place, really.
I see. So, do you want to give us like less than 10 seconds? What's the film about?
From what I remember, it's a romance caught up in war.
I see. So another war film. That's interesting.
And that's really all I got from it watching it. I sort of watched it. I didn't really give it justice. I think the critique of it did influence the way I watched it. I sort of went into it not really expecting much. I watched it on my phone during a break at school.
Okay.
Just thought I'd give it time, and really nothing really stuck. But did see a hint of someone who really understands the image and how to compose one.
I see. All right, so maybe then next we'll move on to Killer's Kiss, 1955. Do you want to tell us what that one's about?
Not much of an improvement.
Not much of an improvement. So wait, before we get into the cinematography of it, like, what do you remember about the
plot? It's about this boxer and this ballet dancer, and sort of their drama and there's something to do with something else. I didn't really watch it properly.
I see.
But
okay, we're getting to the good ones. These ones, yeah. But either way, so it's about a ballerina and a boxer, yeah.
As you can tell, I'm not as enthusiastic as about these ones, as you'll see later on. But the only real improvement from Fear and Desire that we saw in Killer's Kiss was structure. It definitely ran smoother than Fear and Desire, and I think once again his cinematography as well, his skill in camera, definitely the standout. And also, the standout was definitely the ballet dancing sequence and the sequences in boxing. I think the strength of this film, and it's not really saying much, was the action and the movement of characters, not so much story. The characters of themselves weren't very interesting, and again, I think that's because in such a short time, only being an hour long, didn't really have an opportunity to expand upon those characters, much like Fear and Desire.
I see.
But nevertheless, an improvement from his previous work.
Okay, so then next we have The Killing, 1956.
The Killing is definitely a good film, I will say.
So his first good film, is that what I'm taking away from this?
It's a huge leap, I would say. Yeah.
Okay.
It still hasn't broken the 90-minute mark, still just under with an hour and 25 minutes, but it is a noir thriller about this character. I think his name is I got to Google this.
Let's call him John. What do we think?
Oh, you're actually close. Johnny Clay.
Oh, no way.
And it's a heist thriller film, which is very unique and captivating as it takes place in a horse racetrack.
Oh, this one sounds like it's worth a watch. Okay.
And it's very interesting to see all these characters, and in any good heist film, things go wrong, and you see them as they completely fall out of control over the operation. So definitely a super captivating film with great characters and acting performances. I think Sterling Hayden, the captain from Doctor Strangelove, made his first Kubrick appearance in this film, in The
really
Killing,
cool.
a few years before.
Do you not happen to be Group Captain Lionel Mandrake? Is that who we're talking about, Keanu? Or
Is it?
Different?
It is, yeah.
Oh, that's yeah. I don't know if anyone watching the video podcast,
The guy who starts it all.
I see.
Kicks it off. One thing that stood out was definitely an iconic shot from Kubrick's films. The shot of where the camera follows very closely to a horse, racing along a track, and it's just a very hypnotizing, very hectic shot, which does reflect very cleverly the tone of the film, which is just very fast-paced, chaotic. Very, very enjoyable watch.
Okay. Then what do you have to say about Paths of Glory 1957? So there's only a 1-year gap between this and The Killing. Oh wow.
So yeah, his earlier work, interestingly, there's a pattern in his films where his earlier work is very frequent. He's just bashing out these films in 1 or 2 years apart. And then you get into his latest career where he takes more time to probably construct his narratives and get things done as he earned more control over his films. But Paths of Glory is definitely not. You don't get a lot of his expressiveness in Paths of Glory as much as his other films. But that's not to say that it's not good. It's actually an amazing anti-war film that is a very aggressive, cold take on the very violent clash between war and humanity as it deals with the French army and is a conflict of how they should treat their soldiers, of where they should execute them for cowardice or just do the humane thing and not do that.
I see. Yeah, so this is kind of a recurring theme for Kubrick then, like being an anti-war sort of director.
And even more sort of broad than that, he does look at humanity's downfall in a way, in a whole bunch of different situations, of course, in war and its deteriorating effects on people in that way. Definitely a very sharply made film. Again, you see great compositions in his work. And another thing was the tracking shots. I think it was the first of his films that had a frequent use of tracking shots, where we do see in his later work, especially The Shining.
That's of course a motif of Kubrick's, but go.
But yeah, it's definitely interesting to see his earlier work and how you see sort of these little hints of what he'll use later on, and it's sort of like, he's slowly detaching from rules of filmmaking and sort of just adopting his own approach to the form.
I see. So I've got a question for you, Keanu, at this juncture. You might not answer this. If not, I'll Google it while we're on about the next one. But which film do you think employed the first use of the Kubrick stare? If you want to tell us a bit about what the Kubrick stare is.
Oh,
I don't know the answer to this. I'm happy to find out.
The Kubrick stare. Before I answer the other question, the Kubrick stare, it was actually became a little TikTok trend for a second, and it's when the character.
I never noticed that.
It was a little TikTok trend for a little bit, and it's when the character lowers their head a little bit and then stares through their eyebrows, and they kind of look a bit menacing and a bit psychotic. And it's definitely used frequently in his films to just show a character that's completely consumed by their own malevolence or their evil.
I see. I've just found the answer to it if you want to hear it. Unless you know.
His first film, I'm trying to think.
The first film that used the Kubrick stare.
Was it Clockwork Orange?
It was a Clockwork Orange. Well done.
In the opening scene, you just see what's his name, Malcolm McDowell's character, Alex DeLarge, just stares so menacingly into the lens for like 3 solid minutes. And it's just
You're too good, Keanu. Because I've just found, if you don't mind, I like to talk about this quickly. This is a story about that exact scene. So let me know if you've already heard about this. Kubrick apparently requested that McDowell would react to hearing music by Beethoven for this scene, right? So this is a quote from Kubrick. I'm going to play the Beethoven Choral Symphony real loud. See what happens. So I was doing various things like Don't Forget, and I'm also supposed to be a little high. And so kind of this look came, and he suddenly started to laugh. And he was laughing because the eyes were kind of up and glazed over the mouth, kind of took on a weird look. And when he started to laugh, we knew we had it. We knew that's when it was going to be, because we were making a comedy, let's face it, and all I had to do was repeat it for that beginning shot. Sorry, that wasn't Kubrick, that was McDowell, the actor. But he was talking about Kubrick laughing at his performance of that shot.
It was definitely one of the few times, not really few times, but when from the initial stages of rehearsal where Kubrick really enjoyed a character's decisions. I think, and another thing, I think the whole part of singing in the rain when he's kicking the guy in the house, and having that juxtaposition.
Singing in the rain.
So Alex DeLarge, Malcolm McDowell's character, sings "Singing in the Rain" very frantically as he
in Clockwork Orange. You're kidding.
As he beats up somebody.
Oh, I need to watch this movie. No. Okay.
Absolutely vital you watch it.
Absolutely. That's one for my list.
But I believe that was Malcolm McDowell's choice in rehearsal, and Kubrick just loved it. I think they both got along really well because of their very dark senses of humor. They definitely shared that, and that's probably how they kicked off so well with Clockwork.
And then, of course, that became like a motif later into his career. That's really cool.
Yes.
So next on your list of films to talk about is Spartacus, 1960.
Spartacus is interesting. I'm not very fond of the historical epics, as they're just super, super long and very easily dated. But Spartacus is pretty good. It's pretty good. I think the battle sequences and the production design and the character of Spartacus, they're all very well portrayed, very well displayed. But probably and that's all good because those are all good things, and that did influence the fact that the film did really well box office wise. I think it was the highest grossing of the year, of that year, so 1960.
Do you think that's the first time he crossed that milestone, or?
Definitely, yeah. I think Puzzle of Glory was up against a few better films at the time. He was still coming into it, but Spartacus, you can't really credit Kubrick for much. I mean, it's definitely doesn't have the amount of depth as his other films do, and that's definitely because he was not present for the pre-production phase. In fact, he just came in 1 week into the shoot when Kirk Douglas, the producer, sacked the original guy.
We're going to bring Kubrick in to save this. So, yeah, okay.
And he definitely proved that he can handle big projects with it. Being able to come on and then still put on a film that did well box office wise, was the objective at the end of the day.
That's really interesting.
But yeah, definitely his lack of creative control does show. That's not to say that the film is bad.
But it's not really his film. Like he didn't have his own mark on it like some of the other ones.
I feel like if he loved the film the way that he loved his own, the ones that he wasn't hired for, the ones that he just was actively trying to create himself, and he had that same sort of approach to Spartacus and the same level of control, then it might have been a very different film.
Okay. So now I think we're gonna thank you for sitting with us, folks. Now we're gonna move on to a film that Keanu was very, very passionate about. Lolita, 1962. Do you want to tell us about the plot of Lolita, just to start, Keanu?
So Lolita is quite a controversial romance. I hate to say the word romance, but that's what the thing says.
It's a dirty word, isn't it? It's a romance.
It's rough. So it's about a guy called Humbert who becomes obsessed with this lady's teenage daughter, and there's this whole very chaotic conflict as the mum sort of falls in love with Humbert, but his infatuations are more with the daughter. It's a very troubling plot, and it definitely was controversial, is still controversial at the time, and was not received. Well, it had mixed reviews, but definitely an overwhelming number of people disgrace it for its material and what it does with it.
I see. Okay, so what do you take away from this film?
What I found most intriguing was how it was received by audiences. It's very easily discredited, very easily disgraced for. You could sort of understand why. There are some parts, especially at the end, where it's almost like they're trying to get you to empathize with this hebephile.
What? Oh, either way, yeah, continue.
It's very easy to see it that way, and I feel like if that was the intention, then this film probably wouldn't have seen the light of day. It definitely would have just been completely just banned. Like that's just not that's not a way to go. But it's easy to fall into that. But I think what the intention was, and I'm trying to be careful here. I might be contradicting myself, but I think the intention for this film, I don't know much about it because, of course, I haven't seen the book. It's based on a book.
Mm-hmm. As many of his films are.
And yeah, but the book definitely has a much more grim tone to it, and the film is a bit more lighthearted, and there were definitely some funny moments in there, of moments where I did laugh. But that is without mentioning that there's a troubling underlying conflict that you experience where the intention of the film is not to get you to empathize with him as much, it's to get you to understand him. I know that kind of doesn't really make sense. It's hard to explain, but you're looking at it from his perspective as a person who doesn't understand.
So this is Humbert, right?
Yeah. So Humbert's character, his perception of reality is completely twisted. Like, it's very easy to see him as like this malevolent predator, but when you see him as the unreliable narrator that he is, and you're sort of seeing things the way he's seeing them, it's very, very troubling to see that he's not, in fact, this malevolent monster. More his actions are and his intentions are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to be forgiving for what he does, but I think it does bring up this very interesting philosophy that evil is not intrinsic with people. It's a thought and it's an action that anyone's capable of, and in this case, it's the perception of reality that's been twisted that sort of allows for this very, very very disturbing thing to exist.
I see.
So definitely, definitely more interesting than. I think it's definitely worth a deep dive into that. I reckon later into our Cinemaniac mission, we'll have a look at this film again, because definitely a film I think that's worth a discussion.
So it really deserves its own episode, is what I'm hearing. That's something we'll do in the future, I think. I think next is my personal favorite Kubrick film, so maybe I'll be able to help you out with this.
Oh, yes.
It's Doctor Strangelove 1964. Thank you very much for recommending this one.
You're absolutely welcome. To kick off Doctor Strangelove, a fantastic film. I think it is where Kubrick well and truly became his own, really. He wasn't sort of in being inspired by this. He really just had his own style of it and was exploring all of his things, his comedies in there, his black comedies in there, that is, his unique craft and the extremity of his content. That's all there in this film. That's probably the first time you see all three of those elements together. Mm-hmm. And it does have the highest critic score of all of his films, interestingly, with 98% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Whoa!
Yeah.
The critics, 98% is that's big.
Definitely a film that is widely regarded as great. You know, it's a war comedy classic, I reckon, 100%. And yeah, it did take center stage with that use of irony and juxtaposition that is a central quality in all of his work and what would be upcoming after this film. So it was very cool to see that take center stage for his first independent, well, not independent in that way, but independent is in his own style.
It was his project, unlike the Spartacus or whatever. Like, I can see you've written some quotes here that really exemplify the irony of the film. One of them, I believe, was actually the very first Cinemaniacs movie quote quiz.
Oh yes,
gentlemen, you can't fight it here. This is the war room.
Very iconic film quote, especially from Kubrick's work. Just that very absurd, very it's just so funny.
It
How
is,
it-
it is, and like
yeah.
this is one of my favorite things about Doctor Strangelove, Keanu, is that um the film started right. So it was based on a book. I actually can't remember the name of the book, but it's based on a serious book about the Cold War, right? And you get Kubrick starting to make this film, and apparently after 1 or 2 weeks of production, after trying to make it a serious film, he's like, "No, this is too absurd. This needs to be a comedy." And he basically started from scratch and made it into the black comedy that we ended up seeing on our screens. And often when films make such big creative changes, like midway through their development, it really shows because they appear like disjointed and like badly thought out. But that doesn't come across at all with Doctor Strange.
Oh yeah, and that it's definitely worth mentioning just how great, especially Peter Sellers was in it, playing 3 different characters, and all of which, especially the
See,
Doctor.
I've heard this, but I actually hadn't noticed it until. So what? Who does he play? He plays Lionel Mandrake, the British guy at the start, with that amazing, British voice. Yes.
Yes, he plays that. He plays
Uh-huh.
him. He plays President Merkin Muffley and Doctor Strangelove.
Wait.
He's all 3.
Hang on. He plays Merkin Muffley and Doctor Strangelove.
Yeah.
But they have so many scenes together. That's amazing.
You're never in the same shot.
No, I never noticed that. But like, that's really interesting. Wow, what a performance!
He was just hilarious in it, especially him at the end as the Doctor.
Probably don't want to say that quote though. I think that one will get us demonetized on YouTube. But we'll say, he basically says, "Angry German man, I can walk." Great, it's a great line. And then what happens immediately after that, Keanu? What happens immediately after that?
Probably the most grand spectacle.
So this is a spoiler, by the way. This is a spoiler for Doctor Strangelove.
If you haven't seen it, you probably okay. But it's a great ending, fantastic. Where after a very absurd line, the world just ends. I mean, all these atomic bombs just explode to the beat of the opening to Vera Lynn's "We'll Meet Again,"
which is like such a famous song from World War II. But like, and you know what? This is my favorite part of the film. Is like the book ending. So the film starts off with this really creepy sort of disclaimer. Where I don't know if the military made him put that there, or maybe you do know what happened with the disclaimer.
Okay,
either way. So the disclaimer of the film starts off with, "It is the stated policy of the United States Air Force that the events that are depicted in this film could not occur in real life," right? And then I think Kubrick sort of takes that as a challenge, because I think nuclear war is absurd. There are no winners. But in that film, he tries to show that no matter how confident the Air Force is that these sorts of things can't happen, is that all it takes is, certain amounts of human error with where machines are involved, which becomes a theme in the next film that we'll talk about, with the Doomsday device, that accidents can happen which could end the world. And we got very close to that during the Cold War. Like, think the Cuban Missile Crisis, or, there was this one really crazy thing where the Russians almost launched their nukes because their system was picking up, like, sunbeams reflecting off clouds. And then one guy in the office was like, "Yeah, that's a mistake." Or like, the Americans detected like a flock of geese as an ICBM. We came very close to this sort of stuff happening. And if you watch Doctor Strangelove, it really, really asks you to consider whether we should be trusted with that kind of power. It is about humanity destroying itself.
Oh yeah. It's an amazing. It's truly like such a great film. There's another little, and definitely a lot more brash example of irony and juxtaposition with the "Peace is our profession" billboard at the base.
As a military base, exactly. Yep.
That's irony in itself, but it's definitely in the foreground. You just see a Browning 50 cal machine gun just going ablaze.
and what happens in front of those signs later in the film, Keanu?
What happens to them?
The base gets stormed.
Yeah.
By another, like, we see a war, and in the same shots of the guys fighting each other, there are signs that say "Peace is our profession." Crazy.
And I think that's another thing that makes Kubrick so great, is that his images are always more. There always seems to be a double meaning in his images as well, and like they're just so much more than just what they are.
Absolutely.
And that's like probably the strength of the form, where the image says a lot more than words.
100%. Are we happy with that for Doctor Strangelove, Keanu?
I am happy with that.
Perfect. All right, so now we're going to move on to another great one that we watched in cinemas on 75mm film.
Oh,
God, that was a good time. At the Ritz Cinema in Greenwich. Just a quick shout out to you folks. 2001: A Space Odyssey, 1968. So first, before we start, is this Kubrick's first color film? Were any of the other ones color?
It is.
Okay, so all the films we've spoken about
Oh
before...
no, he's not. No, sorry.
No.
Spartacus is black and white. Sorry, yeah. Oh, Spartacus is color.
You mean? Okay.
Yes.
So except Spartacus, out of all the ones we've spoken about before, all of them were black and white. And even then, I promise you, especially with Doctor Strangelove, and I'm guessing you think the same for Lolita, they hold up today. But
yeah,
2001: A Space Odyssey, color film. What do you have to say about it, Keanu?
Wow. 2001 is regarded as the greatest film of all time, and it's easy to see why. I mean, of course, you get Kubrick at his best with what he explores and how he explores it. Just such a true, like probably his most epic film in that way, in that sense, where he explores pretty much everything about us, about humans. And he sort of creates this mythology of, how he came to be and what lies ahead, and I think that was the film that he did redefine or define the cinematic experience, and it's really about taking people where it's impossible, taking people to the impossible, to a past that we can't return to a future that may never exist, and beyond that. So I mean, it's truly a film that took people to a place where we might never go. But that's not to say that this film is distant, because it's so out there.
I feel like, unlike a lot of sci-fi films, this one feels grounded. We don't get like look at Star Wars, Star Destroyers hopping between stars and more. Like, it all takes place sort of within the realm of possibility. But like, I want to talk about. Okay, I went into this film pretty much completely cold. The only thing I knew about this film, Keanu, was the famous what's the thing that Hal says? I'm sorry, Dave.
I'm sorry, Dave.
Open the Part B doors out. That's all I knew about. So I was expecting sci-fi epic, right? And then we walk into the cinema. The film starts. How does the film start, Keanu?
Oh, geez, it's such a grand. I think it feels like 10 minutes of just black, and you just hear the Ligeti not classical, his composition. Just Is
this the voices, or is this the
yeah? I think it is. Yeah.
Which we keep memeing, but like my point is, you start the film off right, and I want you to put yourself in the shoes of an audience goer from the '60s, right? You've been told there's this sci-fi epic we're going to watch in a cinema. You walk in, and what do you see? You see ancient humans on Earth, right? And then, that continues for about 15 minutes. No sci-fi, nothing. And then at about the 15-minute mark, one of them throws a bone up into the air. And then I don't know, what's the name of that transition, Keanu?
It's a match cut.
It's a match cut. A match cut to a bone. He throws the bone in the air, and then while it's in the air, space station. And then the sci-fi part of the movie starts. And I think that does a really good job of connecting the film to a greater theme of, like, the evolution of humanity and, like, all, techno-skepticism.
Like, it's so powerful. Like, just 2 shots, and you have the whole thing. You put the whole timeline from the very beginning to the near future of just all that, just in that.
I agree.
In that little section of this huge film.
And then when the voices start, when they see the monolith, like, oh my god, I love it.
It's like it's haunting, because it's just so. It's just pure experience, that film. Like it just defines a movie experience where you don't have to know what's happening, but you just feel it. You feel something. You know what? You can't explain it, and it's just so much greater than you. And it's just like you're just in awe of it.
And I think the last thing I'll say about this film is that one of the reasons why it really holds up today is because the theme of the danger of AI is especially prevalent today. Just think, this is a 60-year-old film, and only now we're starting to see ChatGPT and whatnot. And the kind of Elon Musk a few years ago was talking about, like, oh, AI could destroy humanity, and it's only taken now for it to feel like that could happen within our lifetimes. Like, you watch this film and you see an AI rebelling against the humans that are meant to be controlling it, and that's a central part of the film. And you just have to realize how ahead of his time Kubrick really was.
Yeah, I think his, what like elevates his work and him as a filmmaker to, like, the highest tier, and it's like probably the what do they say in basketball? The Mount Rushmore of directors is like his imagination is just so incredibly unique, and also his skill to bring that to bring that to fruition. Just have those two things on such a high level is like the two markers for an artist, and he just excels in both of those things so high up. I mean,
agree.
yeah, wow.
Of course. All right, so I think we're going to move on to the next film, Keanu. I haven't seen this one. So this is A Clockwork Orange, 1971. Do you want to tell us about it?
Whew. Wow. So
we're saying a lot of that this episode. Wow.
Clockwork Orange was, if Lolita was controversial, this was like a whole another level of controversy. To the point where it did influence the youth, and they did see a rise in teenage crime in England, and they believe that this was a contributing factor, this film.
Oh my
so
goodness.
Kubrick had to take it down, but that's not to say that this film is definitely a spectacle of his work and his style, because again, you get extreme craft, content, themes across the board, and definitely has this really great exploration of this thing of free will. And as monstrous and as despicable as Alex is as a character,
hey, what are you talking about?
not you, Alex Delage, that is, from the film. It's what's it? It's sort of, you sort of have to ask yourself that how the authorities attempt to cure him of his behavior. Is it justice for everybody he's destroyed, or is it inhumane torture, really? And like, as much as it's hard to empathize with someone like that, you definitely. But yeah, this is the interesting thing about his films, where he's not coming at you with a subjective point of view on a topic. He's not like giving his 2 cents on something. He's showing it for. He's showing it, but it's like he's almost. Jeez, I'm gonna be lost.
That's a powerful question to ask. Like, you know, we have so many issues with the criminal justice system these days. Like, I think that's a prescient issue to be explored in a film.
Yeah, and what's it? He more than just express his own 2 cents on something. He shows it's a reflection, and he's sort of asking the audience of what we think. He's not saying which side is right. He's not saying that it's better that he's being tortured for what he's done, or it's better that he's not, or it's better to, you know, there's a more humane option. There's a more humane alternative to this treatment of this person. Doesn't say which one's right, but that's sort of way. That's what makes his films timeless. Where there's a question, as you know, as complicated as that. As we get older and we change, our values change and our perspectives change. We see the film differently. This is what his films are most known for. That the fact that you can see them over and over again, years apart between each other, and see something completely different. Because his films aren't tied to a subjective take on a subject. It's a big question. His films are big questions.
Okay.
Big question marks. And he says you figure it out.
This is another one of your favorites, Keanu. How about Barry Lyndon?
Okay. In a tier list, I put Barry Lyndon at like top 3.
Oh, wow, that's a big call.
Which is interesting, because I find that when it first came out, it was not received as well as it is starting to be received now, after all these years. I think it just broke out of its budget in the box office. I think it only made a little bit more, and it definitely wasn't received too well. But I struggled, even after seeing it for the first time, and even not being very fond of period dramas, especially ones that exceed 3 hours long. Barry Lyndon is one of my favorite films of all time. Like, I think top 5, and I think it is my. Do I make the decision right now to put it? All right, I'm gonna do it. Barry Lyndon is my favorite Kubrick film.
Wow,
as of now.
That's a big call from you. I gotta say.
For the longest time, it was The Shining. I love The Shining. I think it was the film that made me fall in love with the genre of horror. 100%. But Barry Lyndon is so amazing, because initially it's like it was the black sheep. It was the ugly duckling of Kubrick's work. And, you know, and it's not just, and the only thing it was really it was really praised for was the cinematography. I mean, like, it is one of the most gorgeous films you'll ever see if you go see it. Like, it's an art gallery to watch this film. Every shot is a painting, is an oil canvas painting.
So I think that's next on my watch list then.
Oh
Keanu.
my God.
So you've kind of alluded to it just then. But what do you have to say about The Shining, 1980?
Before I get into The Shining, there's one more thing.
Oh, okay.
About Barry Lyndon.
No, of course.
And it's so much more than a cinema than a visual, visual masterpiece. It's an enthralling tale of humanity's downfall once again, and you see that through the character of Redmond Barry, the protagonist, or the antagonist, however you see him. But definitely a very captivating story, and I find it just as captivating story-wise as it is visually, which is just extra great. And funny, cool story about the cinematography. You might already know it, but I
definitely don't.
The famous candlelit scenes in the film, those shots are entirely filmed in candlelight. There's no other studio lighting, no artificial lighting. Yeah, that's all. Just the candles are all that's illuminating the scene. And they have to use a lens that only NASA had at their disposal, an f.7 lens, which I don't even think you can buy now.
Oh, that's some custom made, like, multi-million-dollar. Yeah.
He had someone modify a camera to have it just fit this lens.
Wow.
And what you get are just these stunning images of just super narrow depth of field and just very, very warm shots in the interior scenes. And the characters you see is when you notice when you look at the film in those scenes, the characters barely move. Like, if they move back and forth from the camera, they'll just fall out of focus. They'll just be completely, the field of view is so small they can only really move sideways to the camera. And even the candles, even just normal candles, don't burn bright enough to expose that much light. So he actually had specialized, or these specialized candles that burn brighter but burn faster.
Wow.
So definitely just this it would have been a hell of a task to get those scenes done and done well, especially to Kubrick's standards. I mean, yeah.
Wow. So the perfectionist perfected even candles.
Oh, geez, yeah.
A NASA grade lens. That's incredible. All right,
it's a great story.
The Shining. What do you have to say about it?
For the longest time, it was my favorite Kubrick film. It was the first of Kubrick that I was introduced to, as I think many people are.
Same for me. I think it was the same Kubrick film. The first Kubrick film.
I think it's the one film that you see of Kubrick's that you see without knowing the name of him, without knowing the director.
True.
Yeah.
Because The Shining, it's not just for film buffs. Like, it's a movie with mainstream appeal.
100%. And I think it's held up so well because how effective it is on its surface, on the epidermis of it. But there's so much to draw out from it that lies beneath it. I mean, there's so much more to say, and this is another film that deserves a deep dive. I think all of his films deserve. There needs to be a deep dive for all of his films.
We'll get. I promise you, Ken, we'll get to them. Now, do you have your keys with you? This will make sense. Do you have them with you or no? Don't go get them if you don't have them.
My keys.
What do you have on your keys, Keanu?
Oh,
you still have it on your keys?
I got a brilliant gift for my birthday last year. It was it's a keychain of the Sidewinder. The keys to the Sidewinder, or the snowmobile.
It's got the room number on it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool.
The Overlook Hotel Sidewinder. Yeah. And there's two that. Yeah, it's just it's brilliant. I love it. I treasure it. It goes with me everywhere.
Absolutely, and the film's got some great quotes as well. Like,
I know as you can see on my nickname.
Here is Johnny. Or even what's the typewriter one that you like quoting?
All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Yeah, and just over and over again. I don't know who wrote that out. I think it was Kubrick that wrote all of that out.
That's really cool.
All those pages. I think he wrote them himself. But The Shining is so great because doesn't rely on jump scares, but it relies more on ambiguity, as any great horror film does. I mean, its atmosphere and its tension and its mystery, it holds so much in, and it just holds this dread through the whole film to the very end, and explores so much. And I mean, I've seen it. I think it's the film I've seen the most as well. I think I've seen it. I'm gonna say over 10 times. I've seen it
Wow.
over 10 times,
Wow.
100%. And you know, you see all these cool, these very interesting interpretations of, you know, all these coincidences and all these theories about these hidden messages, and like there's just so much to pack in this film. And I mean, yeah, truly a timeless piece because you know, I think it's the mystery and I think it's the craft and how it handles those two things that just have carried it through all these years and still remains as a pinnacle part of the horror genre.
Of course, of course. And then I think next on our list, so this is interesting. There's a 7-year gap between The Shining and Full Metal Jacket, which was 1987, a film that I watched this week. So, do you have much to say about Full Metal Jacket?
Full Metal Jacket. I think it's the film of his that sort of explores, maybe apart from Clockwork Orange, it explores the duality of man the most.
Which is, of course, in the film. Like, I think
Yeah.
Joker, he's wearing, what is he wearing? He's wearing a peace pin. And he's also wearing, on his helmet, what does he have written
Born
on
to Kill.
Born to Kill, that's right. And he gets inspected by, like, you know, the inspecting officer. And what does he say? What is that, a peace sign? What are you wearing? And then it's like, it was about the duality of man, sir. The duality of what? The duality of man, sir.
Yeah, I mean, and we were talking about this before, me and Alex. The opening, maybe the first hour of the film, is this great display of, you know, the dehumanization of people, how they become from, you know, human beings to killing machines, essentially, to just, you know, to robots, to machines that are designed to eliminate and exterminate the assigned target.
Of course.
And
like, yeah, go.
The second half of the film, however, when they're in Vietnam in conflict, there's not really much I remember from it, and I think I definitely need to, you know, owe the film a second viewing. But
yeah.
I don't think the second half hits as hard as the first half.
I think the first half is stronger. I think that's a fair take. Yeah, one of the things that I find interesting about Full Metal Jacket, though, is that, like, would you agree that it's an anti-war film?
Anti-war? I mean, like, I think it is. I think he's not like. I think Kubrick just allows the content of the story and just the, you know, what's happening to these people to speak for itself.
I agree, but like what I'm saying is that the image of war that he's portraying is not like a glorified one. It's not like, you know, oh, you know, these people going off to Vietnam. They're like, there's this one scene actually where they interview all of the soldiers from Vietnam. Only I think one or two of them say something positive. Like, you know, I think it's meant to create like a section of society. But the boot camp and whatnot, I think he's really trying to say, like, you know, the way we dehumanize people in war, the horrors of war, like, that's not something we should be aiming for. I think it's the same message as Doctor Strange. Yeah. But I think one of the interesting things about it is that clips from this film have been repurposed in the 21st century to be pro-war. So there's that scene at the very end where, for some reason, I've got no idea why, someone, you know, put it in the comments because you'll be able to comment on Spotify. They're marching through the burning city, and what do they sing?
MICKEYMOUSE.
Yeah, and then that's been repurposed these days to be like me and the boys in the Third World War marching through Shanghai or Europe or whatever, right? And then it's like, you know, it's the Fortnite song, but it's like, and you know, you get the same effect with like a lot of the boot camp scenes. Like over Christmas, it's like, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear Jesus. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's interesting that, like, you know, any piece of media, you can take parts of it and completely change the way that the director intended for it to be viewed. Like, you could see any of those clips and know that they're from Full Metal Jacket without having seen the film, and assume that that Full Metal Jacket is pro-war.
Yeah,
and, you know, I think that's where a lot of the public discourse around that film has taken it these days.
Even in the parts of the film where, you know, characters are very enthusiastic about warfare, especially the guy. I don't know his character's name, but he's in the helicopter and he's just like blazing the farmlands. Get some.
Yeah, but civilians. He's shooting civilians quite clearly.
Like, you know, you understand that that's like, you know, it's again dehumanization. Like, this guy's been conditioned to think this way. These aren't people that he's destroying. It's evil that he's destroying. Like, he's destroying He's destroying communism. Even the opening song is, "We must stop communism in that land. Goodbye, my darling. Hello, Vietnam," or something. Yeah. So yeah, I think the entire film is just this crazy journey of people becoming inhuman.
Yeah, but this is the thing. So you know that scene where the guy's shooting from the helicopter, right?
Mm.
In that scene, we have Joker, one of the characters from the boot camp, who is now like some kind of war correspondent, right? I think he's really meant to be the eyes of the audience.
Yeah.
And he's not happy with what that guy's doing. He's got the guy with the big machine gun is shooting civilians. I can't remember what questions he asks but
I can't remember. Yeah, I remember there's an exchange
but he asks
there.
like, oh, even women and children, and then the guy goes, oh, they're all Viet Cong or some rubbish, right? And again, I think that's really like it's meant to show that even normal people that we met at the start of the film before they went through boot camp, are capable of doing monstrous and inhumane things if they're put in the right situation. Like at the boot camp, there's that one scene where they talk about two famous assassins, and then they're like, what do they have in common? They were members of the U.S. Marines. And in that film, the sergeant, the whatever is the Hartman, right? He's clearly saying there's something to be proud of. Ironically, but you as the audience are meant to look at it and be like, hang on, these two terrorist attacks, that took place. What do they have in common? They were both in the armed forces, and that's something that you're meant to ask questions about. It's not something that you're meant to take at face value as to be a good thing.
Yeah, I think these they're being rewarded for for destruction and that's they're being awarded for destruction that's in service of the greater goal of the West at that time. And
absolutely,
that's like that's the highest the highest merit. Like the more you kill, the more you destroy for king and country. Well, not king and country, for the president, for freedom, for democracy.
Yeah, but and again, that's something that's been repurposed today.
Yeah.
I think with that though, we're going to move on to the last, but certainly not least, Eyes Wide Shut. A 12-year gap between Full Metal Jackets. This came out in 1999.
Jeez. This was the one film that I think Kubrick, he did pass, I think, a few weeks before it was released, so there wasn't any opportunity to, get him to go, what did you mean by that? What did you mean by this scene? So I think that has left Eyes Wide Shut as probably his most puzzling film. I mean, it's puzzling to stand alone, but especially when you consider that, the creator is not around to expand upon anything they was trying to do. The only one thing that I found that he's left was that he deemed Eyes Wide Shut as his greatest contribution to cinema out of all 13 of his films. And interestingly, most people didn't receive it that way. Like, it's not really a film that appears in the top 2 or the people's most favorite Kubricks. It's definitely not a majority favorite, but it's definitely got this very different quality to his other films in that there is meaning literally everywhere. I mean, there's so much hidden. Like, there's literally, like, in the frame, there's just so much. Even as small things as postcards. Apparently, like, every little thing, every little newspaper on the wall or any poster, all these little Christmas cards, they all have some image or something that's suited to the film's themes. And I feel like that's probably why he crowned it as his greatest contribution, is that he put the most into it from probably an effort standpoint as well, having like that much time off from Film Logic. He probably spent the most time on this film. And I think it was definitely, and although it wasn't received as such, I think it made the most, it did the most well at the box office out of all his films. I think it made the most money. I don't think it made like the biggest margin between budget and box office, but it made the most. But I think that's to do with Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise and their relationship, and I think people just wanted to see that. Just wanted to see them together. Yeah.
Look, I haven't seen this, but it blows my mind that Kubrick's career lasted so long. That he worked with, the people he worked with in Doctor Strangelove. And then later in his career, he worked with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. Like, a career spanning 30 years is incredible. Oh, even more. Wait, when was the first
40?
film?
So
40
50...
years. More than 40 years. 45, 46 years. Crazy.
So over like 4 decades, amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, Eyes Wide Shut, like I said, like his most puzzling film. It's interesting because I've seen it twice, and I feel like there's like so much I don't remember from it. Like, it's definitely like a very dreamlike film that you don't really remember much from, other than the fact that it was just very troubling. And it definitely has an interesting concept behind it, where when somebody strays too far from familiarity and from family, and the repercussions for that sort of behavior. Definitely like a nightmarish film that sort of had this very dreadful, spiraling out of control, and also it's so hard to explain this film. I mean, it's so mysterious.
All right, and I think with that, it's time to rank our favorite Kubrick films. Kiana, do you want to lead us off with your 5th favorite Kubrick film, if you can narrow it down?
Coming in at number 5. Oh, geez. I'm not prepared for this, but I think number
Me neither.
5.
I'm writing my list right now.
As I go, I'm putting Clockwork at number 5.
Number 5. Okay, I think that's fair.
Clockwork
For
Orange.
me, I think it's got to be The Shining because I love horror, but I think it's his most conventional film, and I think that some of his other films really show off his prowess as a filmmaker more. What about your 4th pick, Keanu?
I'm gonna put I think Doctor Strangelove is number 4.
Okay, I think that's fair. For me, I think my 4th one's got to be Full Metal Jacket. What's next for you?
Number 3 for me. Oh no, it's between 2. I think I'm gonna put 2001 at 3.
Okay,
very close second.
I think that's fair. I think my 3rd one is going to be 2001 as well. Yep. And then what
Number
about your
2,
second?
I have The Shining. I mean, yeah,
Very
holds it close. Has a piece of my heart on it.
Absolutely. And look, I'm going to leave. What I'm going to do is going to be a bit unconventional. I've only seen 4 Kubrick films, so I'm going to say that Doctor Strangelove is my 2nd favorite Kubrick film. In reality, right now it's my first. But I'm going to go back. I'm going to watch. I think I'm going to watch A Clockwork Orange and Eyes Wide Shut, and then I'll redo this tier list. So what about you? What are your 2nd and 1st favorite picks?
Number 2, I have The Shining. Was number 1, but I think it's been dethroned by what currently stands as my favorite, and that is Barry Lyndon.
Incredible.
Yeah.
All right. That's been a really good discussion, I think. We're going to leave it there, folks, and then we'll come back after the break for a very quick Hall of Fame and Cinemaniacs movie quiz.
Wee-hee.
Welcome back to Cinemaniacs, folks. To the Hall of Fame. Each week we'll be picking 1, or in this case 2 films each, to put on our website to give you a list of what you need to watch to be a true Cinemaniac. So, Keanu, what are your 2 picks this week, because Kubrick's so great, for the Hall of Fame?
Got to put 2 in. If I could, I'd put all of his films from Strangelove all the way up to Eyes Wide Shut. They're just all, absolute pinnacle pieces of this great film we call cinema. So my 2 picks are, first, 2001: A Space Odyssey, solely because it explores so much and leaves so much mystery, and it will, I think, over time, I'll just become to love it more and more and more.
Okay.
And my number 1 pick is the ugly duckling turned beautiful swan, as I put it, Barry Lyndon from 1975.
Absolutely. So I think that's one that I'm going to have to check out. I think my 2 picks will not be a surprise to you. They are Doctor Strangelove. Again, thank you for that recommendation. To this day, it is still in my top 4 favorite films on my letterbox. And also, can't go past a good bit of horror and some Kubrick horror. Can't go past that either. It's got to be The Shining.
Great picks.
Check our website, folks, and we'll put our picks for those films on there and with their ratings. But before we go, Keanu, it's time for the most important segment. Drumroll, please. It's the movie quote quiz from Cinemaniacs. Each week, I will ask Keanu a quote. He will not know what film the quote is from. He will not know what quote I'm going to ask him. And he needs to tell me what film it's from. And hopefully, this, again, just for bonus points, which character and which actor said it. This week, I've picked a Kubrick quote because I thought it was appropriate. So,
Okay.
Keanu, are you ready?
I think so. I hope it's man, there's pressure now. I consider myself a very, very fond person of Kubrick, so I think I'll be embarrassed if I don't get this right.
Okay, let's hope he gets it right. So, I'm not going to say the character's name. Your senior drill instructor. From now on, you will only speak when spoken to. And the first and last words out of your filthy sewers will be, "Sir, do you maggots understand that?"
Sir, yes, sir. That is Gunnery Sergeant Hartman.
Yes.
From Full Metal Jacket's quote.
Do you know the actor's name, though?
Ali Ermey, yes.
Well done, that is correct, Keanu.
Woo!
Very impressive. I'm so glad you got that right as the Kubrick fan that you are.
Yes, he was also in, and I watched Apocalypse Now recently. Very, very similar in material to Full Metal Jacket, and he's also in there. He's a sneaky little helicopter pilot. I think definitely has the same eyes and eyebrows. I think it was him.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So thank you for listening with us on this journey through Kubrick's filmography. Make sure you follow us on YouTube, follow our Spotify, comment, fill out the poll, follow us on our Instagram. Lots of ways for you to stay engaged. I think we're going to return next week with our regularly scheduled programming with whatever films we happen to watch that week. Keanu's got a busy week. We've got some very cool projects happening, so we're going to have to work out
I've got something happening with an acting class, and I've got something happening with a little short film happening.
He's working on a short film. That's
I think.
Yep.
Hopefully.
Is there anything you want to tell the listeners before we head off, Keanu?
Yes. Stanley Kubrick is a true master of the form, and love him or hate him for, the mad genius that he was, and definitely there's something to appreciate in all of his films, and his overall approach to filmmaking. So definitely, for film buffs out there who haven't seen his work, very surprising who haven't seen his work, do see his work. Absolutely. Do see his work.
There you have it, folks. And I just realized we didn't reveal it. Keanu, stand up. Show us your shirt. There it is. Oh, the mark of a true Cinemaniac. Thanks for listening, folks. We'll see you next week. Have a great afternoon. Stay safe wherever you are. See ya.
See y'all.